And I was telling him about your fascinating story of how you started in this space. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Sure. So in 2006, I made the wise or unwise decision to pack my family up and move to a rock in the middle of the Pacific. We moved from Colorado Springs to Kauai in 2006. And at that time, I was an electrician. And to be
Mhm.
honest, I loved that career. It was very tangible. You get to work with your hands. It's very
Right.
rewarding because you would wire a house or wire a building or do something, and then you could see the results of that very quickly. So it, constant reward for success. A few months into that, I discovered that my love for that career was mental only and not physical. And I had three ruptured discs in my back, which presented as a left leg pain and just a basic inability to move.
Mhm.
And as a man, I did the right thing and I ignored it for for a number of months, up until the point where my wife said, "We're going to drag you to the doctor." And so they essentially did that. And I went and had an MRI on Kauai. And the MRI tech was so excited about the fact that I was able to walk into the MRI room at all, based on what he had seen. And so he took me to anyway, long story short, got put in front of a radiologist. He recommended me to a neurosurgeon who 2 days later was performing one of the, I don't know if it's one of the first, but an early microdiscectomy on me.
Mhm.
And so I had those discs repaired in a microdiscectomy, but the instructions to me were you can't lift more than 5 pounds for a number of weeks. I don't remember what that was now. And you can't lift more than 10 pounds for a number of months. And then you should stay away from excessive heavy lifting and things like that for an extended period of time. I
Mhm.
was actually even supposed to restrict how much time I spent in the car. So crap, my career is no, I can't perform my career. I had gone to school for computer science in college, and
Mhm.
but I honestly
But you
didn't,
said
for
you.
me, like the prospect of software development. I'm a little bit too outgoing and want to engage with people a little more than I thought that career would deliver, and so that's how I ended up in electrical work. um, but I regained my Microsoft certifications, took a bunch of classes, learned as much as I could about technology and business while I was cooped up in my house. And I had to feed my family. I had to, I had two kids at the time, and
Mhm.
so I printed out a bunch of flyers, named my company MAS Services, printed out a bunch of flyers, and I drove to one side of the island and I just started walking from business to business. And I'd hand out a flyer and some cookies, and I'd walk into the business. I'd say, "Hey, my name is Steve Massaro. I do IT work for businesses. I don't want to waste a bunch of your time, but I just want you to know who I am and that I'm here to help you." Um, Being a new guy in Hawaii on a little island, the response was less than stellar. Who are you? Where are you from? I don't know you. I'm not going to let you touch my computers, which,
Mhm.
to be honest, is kind of smart. And But I had to try, and so I went from door to door to door and incurred rejection after rejection after rejection. And after a few weeks of that, I came home and I thought, well, I was sitting at home and I was like, well, I've failed. The phone's not ringing. Nobody needs my help. And then it rang. And I went and I successfully helped somebody on the island, and they told somebody else, and then the same thing and the same thing. And then it just went.
Mhm.
And over time, I started picking up bigger and bigger clients. At that time, I was just charging by the hour, whatever I could do to pay bills. And I got a phone call from a gentleman named Mark Gregory, who I had, I'm not going to say acquired. I had taken on a client who used to be one of his.
Okay.
And when he called me, he said, "Hey, this is Mark Gregory. I own IT Kauai. You just got this client from me." And I said, I thought I was about to be told the way things work on the island. And I was like, no, 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 I earned that client. And he goes, no, 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 that's not what I'm saying. You sure did. I've heard great things about you. You seem to do a good job on the island. I was just wondering if we could get lunch sometime. I was a little put off by this approach. But I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. So I said, sure. And I went and got lunch with Mark, and he asked the exact opposite questions that I thought. He asked, can you ever take a vacation? And, we had a lot in common. Like I said, no, because I'm afraid if I leave, I'm not going to be able to support a customer. And it just
Mhm.
kind of went down the hill from there, or up the hill. And he said, I think I'm looking for a business partner. And I'm not sure if you're interested in something like that. And in my mind, and I didn't know how to put this back then, I was much younger. Soldiers fight all day long and armies win wars. Inside of me, I knew that I wanted to do this with people and not by myself. And so I said, yeah. 17 years later, that company was at our biggest. I think we were 30 people. We're realistically 25 people big, servicing over 80 clients statewide as a managed service provider, an IT consulting company, and a cybersecurity consulting company.
Mhm.
And we did very well. We had a lot of fun. It was a great experience.
So how big was IT Kauai when you guys decided to work together?
It was basically me and Mark,
It's just
and
you guys, right? Okay.
he had a woman named Denise who's still there and
Mhm.
does the bookkeeping and accounting. She had more roles back then. She answered the phone. She kept the two of us corralled, which that's a job in itself. Huge. Denise is a fantastic, fantastic human being, and she's still there, still works for Mark, and is a huge asset. But it was just, in a sense, the three of us.
Mhm.
And to be honest, at that moment, we really couldn't afford Denise. We just did whatever we could to make money, but we fought through it.
Mhm.
And Mark was very loyal to her as she was to him, and we figured it out. Um, and it wasn't always easy. That time in the United States, 2007, 2008 was pretty horrible economically. We just fought. And anyway, in the end of it, we went from basically a couple of people. Mark had a decent customer base, but not a lot, all the way up to many millions of dollars a year and 80 clients. Um,
Great.
in Just after COVID, I had some family members that needed help on the mainland, and I was left with a little bit of a quandary. I'm a family first person. The reason why I work is to support my family. No, I'm included in that, but to support my family. That's just super super critical to me. And those people needed me here on the mainland, and so I moved back here, and I sold my half of what is now called IT Hawaii
Mhm.
back to Mark, and the woman Sandy, who is now the president of that company, also an incredible individual. And they are operating that company fantastically. It's doing really really well. They're great people that deliver a great service to that state. Um, and I was going to calm down and settle down and maybe take some time off and help my family members and things like that. And I did that, but I couldn't sit still. And so I worked with another MSP in Houston for a period of time and helped with their operations as an executive successfully. Um,
Mhm.
and then uh, we decided to separate that relationship. And they are also great people. But I would rather be the king of my own small kingdom than the prince of somebody else's. And so I fired up Bits Midwest, where I deliver IT consulting, cybersecurity consulting, and IT managed services to local customers and anybody that needs my help nationwide on a consulting basis.
Great. Well, it sounds like the 12 questions for experts is right up your alley, I would say. Um, the reason why I started 12 questions initially was because I was really interested what people have to say about some of these topics that, everyone in cybersecurity meets on a daily basis. To me, they're kind of, you'd say, basic or fundamental. A lot of the times it's the stuff that you kind of think, is going to be figured out, would have been figured out a long time ago. But it turns
Right.
out cybersecurity is you could say it's a living organism, right?
Oh, it's huge.
Tech is huge. There's always new tech. The way the adversarial landscape is changing is, I mean, it's horrible, but it's kind of amazing as well at the same time. The way the supply chain is changing, right? Like it used to be individuals doing bad stuff, and now it's organizations that are selling things to other organizations that are selling things to other organizations that end up doing bad stuff, and so
State-sponsored stuff, all of that. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Horrible.
So yeah, and with what's going on geopolitically right now, it's so I guess it's only natural that we're that the environment is changing, so we naturally have um, a lot of different opinions about how to respond, right, to this environment. So,
Absolutely.
and that's kind of what the 12 questions is aiming at. The format, I'm sure everyone listening already knows this, but is I have questions that are um, they don't have a lot of you basically have to pick one of the answers that I'm proposing. It's kind of like a cheeky way of me saying you have to prioritize. So let's talk you know keeping priorities in our heads all the time. But at the same time, do want you to explain your answer. I think that's the main point, is to be able to have these discussions and to kind of share with everyone else what your reasoning behind is, and maybe that's going to
Right.
inspire someone to take a different approach or do something different in the future. So I
Boy,
always
you
do
picked a
a
great
yeah.
person for this podcast because I live firmly in the gray, and you're asking me to be a lot more binary than that. So this is going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to it. I do have a testing question that I always do.
Okay.
Um, have you watched any of the other?
I
Do you know
have.
what the question is?
I
Or
don't.
do you probably don't
I
remember?
don't
Okay, cool.
remember.
That's good. That's
Hit me with
good.
it.
So if you had to um, watch a full game of lacrosse or a UFC fight, which one would you go for and why?
The lacrosse game. Um, I I do not extract joy from watching people suffer.
Okay.
Um, and that's not to say that there isn't implied suffering in losing a lacrosse game, but I I used to watch boxing games with my dad as a child,
Mm-hmm.
and what I focused on in that was not actually the winner or the loser; it
Mm-hmm.
was the technique.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even when I was young, I found the art of boxing really cool,
Mm-hmm.
because you basically have to be able to think and consider your actions while you're getting punched in the face. And so I found that fascinating, but I did not enjoy watching somebody get hurt,
Right.
which I suppose is why I'm in the industry that I'm in. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like watching people get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I am very empathetic, so I take that home with me. I don't even like watching reality shows that involve relationships where like somebody gets in a relationship and that person gets taken away from them. It's very dramatic and they get hurt. Like I just don't even want to watch it because I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
As such, I like watching more directly competitive things like a lacrosse game or a soccer game or,
Mm-hmm.
something like that, where even if they lose, the people have the ability to get back up and try again the next time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that answer. You have passed the test. There's no right answer, but you did it. All right. So let's go to the questions. The first question is really about where BYOD and device management meet, sort of a thing, right? That this is a big topic. There's a lot of different opinions on this. Um, in a perfect world, I guess we would like to have device management everywhere. As many security layers that you can use. As a security professional, you'd probably like to use those. But then reality is sometimes, that just isn't the way you can go do things. And so the question is, would you say it's more practical for typically for like mid-sized companies, I guess you could say, or for mid-sized organizations and mid-sized teams to have a strong BYOD policy or a managed devices policy only?
This hurts. You are this the gray area of Steve here. Okay. I'm going to say, m- um, if you look at the expense of the right piece of equipment over managed devices, is my answer. But if
Mhm,
you look at the expense of the piece of equipment over its life,
mhm,
with the user and you consider the additional just support that's required to support somebody's device that exists in a dual world where they use it for work and then they use it at home, the managed device usually pays for itself
Mm-hmm.
because you get increased productivity, you get decreased security incidents, just technical incidents. You have more control over what they use and when, and all that kind of stuff. And so, managed devices, well, at first glance, might seem more expensive to the company. When you take all of the ancillary costs that surround the
Mm-hmm.
use of BYOD objects, oftentimes I think you'll find that managed devices are cheaper to implement.
So it sounds like this to you isn't just about cybersecurity, but it's a lot about operations as well, and just
Everything for me is
right.
about the business prospect of it.
Mm-hmm.
People like to put cybersecurity into the bubble of, are you keeping me safe or not? And I wish it was that binary, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has to be taken from the perspective of business. For instance, I can keep a company perfectly safe. If I walk into their office, I unplug every cable, I turn off every computer, and I don't let anybody do anything with any piece of technology. They're safe. They're not going to get hacked, not going to get phished. They're not going to get ransomware. Nothing like that's going to happen. Nobody's going to steal their data. They're perfectly safe.
Mm-hmm.
But the operational impact of doing something like that is massive.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to, and this is why I say I exist in the gray, we have to understand the business impact of the suggestions that we make before we make them,
Mm-hmm.
or we could harm a business more than we protect them.
Mm-hmm.
What if the net result of a vulnerability being exploited is that it costs the company $100, but the cost to mitigate that risk is $10,000? Well, just let it ride. Pay the $100 when it comes around.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I look at those things that way. I do look at managed devices through that lens as well.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, when you look at all of the issues that surround BYOD, managed devices are cheaper to a company usually. The one
Mm-hmm.
thing that might defy that to a certain extent is mobile devices like cell phones and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the workstations go, just buy the desktop, buy the laptop.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that expensive if you buy the right thing for the role, especially if you're in a regulated industry or you deal with a lot of PII.
Have you seen any challenges with um, device management when it comes to organizations that rely heavily on remote work?
Actually, I find the inverse.
Mm-hmm.
I I I love the prospect of remote work. The truth is, I'm in my office right now. I love working from an office, but I
Mm-hmm.
love the freedom to just be able to wake up, get to work, do my job from home, and go to bed on the days where that is the wiser decision.
Mm-hmm.
People have families. People have like all kinds of things going on in their life, and if you ask them to sacrifice some of that, well, to a certain extent, you have to pay them for that.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow you either incur higher turnover at the same pay rate, or you have to pay them a little bit more to pack up their stuff and pay for the gas and pay for the inconvenience and drive to the office. So having
Right.
at least a hybrid option can be financially beneficial to a company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Being able to manage the device makes that a million times easier. You take so many what ifs out of play, especially if you consider security first from the bubble of the user and second from the device and not from the network perimeter. Being able to manage that device is a really, really handy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't do it, if you do BYOD, there's actually ways around that too, using things like Windows 365 or things like that, where you can still separate the existence of that that personally owned device from the business existence from a security perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I actually think that corporate owned devices work better in hybrid environments. The downside to it is if you have somebody quit or leave in a frustrating fashion, they're going to take that. They're never going to send you that computer back or whatever. But that's not really what's valuable.
Right.
A
Right. Right.
laptop is a few $100. The data that they're in control of, the information that they're in control of, can be worth millions of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars or something like that. So it's just way better to protect that and forget about the stupid piece of hardware that's just the window to it.
Yep. Cool. So cybersecurity is about people, process, technology. It's always these three, right? Um, Now the question is, which one of these do you think is the most important? Which one of these you'd recommend your customers to focus on the most? Where should they invest the most?
Process, 100%, without a doubt. Businesses are about process. Um, and it's not about a person, and it's not about technology. The people perform processes, and the technology enhance or enable processes. But it is possible to run a safe business without any technology. Let's say I wanted to go and resale used clothing. I can
Mm-hmm.
walk down the street, I only have to get in a car, walk down the street to thrift stores, and I sort through the things and I buy the nicest, fanciest stuff for the thrift stores. And then I open my garage up and I hand draw a sign that says, um, Steve's Fantastic Used Fashions. And I put it all on racks and I get out a notepad for my accounting. And all I've done is save people the effort of going through a lot of, maybe not
Right.
applicable to them fashion, and found the most opportune ones, and I sell it out of my garage.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, you don't need any technology. You're just providing a service to people. There's a gap in value there. You're saving people time and effort by expending that time and effort on your own.
Mm-hmm.
That's what business is. It's about a value gap. The people and technology are secondary to that. Let's say you want to do twice as much of that same thing without technology. You understand that you bring in this much money, but maybe somebody's hungry and they're willing to take that much money to do the same thing. So you send them out, go have them do this. You just give them the guidelines, the process that they're supposed to go through in selecting those clothes from the various thrift stores. And then the process they go through when they sell them. You teach them your secret, and they come in and they do that for you. They basically double their value, and you hand them, their half of the money. So you make 50% more money without expending any more time. You just hand your process to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say then you go, well, what if we technologize this? Can we save time? That's what technology is supposed to do. Save time, improve quality, make you safer. That's about it. That's really what technology does. And so you implement a system where you automatically order things and they get delivered. You pick the best things, automatically get ordered, but those best things are on a set of criteria defined by a selection process. And so you go through that. Inside of a business, there's not very many non-technical businesses out there, but it's important to understand that it is possible to have them. And the reason why that's important is because then you look at your business from the perspective of, how do I enable my processes to be
Mm-hmm.
faster, deliver higher quality, or be safer with technology? And how do I multiply those processes or enable them with people? So you can't have a business without prospect or without
Mm-hmm.
process, whether you realize it or not. That's what makes business viable. So in people, process, and technology, should really be process, people, technology. That's why I start with process.
Mm-hmm. All right. So thinking about priorities, one other thing that I'm always fascinated by is how people think about prevention, detection, and response. The two big topics usually are prevention and response, right? Those are kind of the two sides that people focus on the most. And the question again is, which of those do you think businesses need to get really good at first? Prevention or response?
Oh, God. Let's hypothetically say that a business has already gone through a risk assessment, a business impact analysis, whether it's just a quick mental process or something, and they
Mm-hmm.
understand where their vulnerabilities are, and they understand what the impact of those being exploited would be, all of that kind of stuff. I would suggest in that case that prevention is more important if you understand, because all parts of business are about risk mitigation. And so that's a critical component of business, mitigating risks,
Mm-hmm.
enabling performance, mitigating risks. So with that in mind, I would say prevention. That's a tough question for me, because I think that a fully fleshed out cybersecurity program always includes consideration for how you would respond, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the continuity component of it, right? Like, how do I
Mm-hmm.
stay in business if this bad thing happens? How do I not if this has the potential of $1 million in damage, how do I respond in such a way where I only have to pay $10,000 if it happens, or, something like that.
Hmm.
Um, but since I have to answer A or B, I'm going to say prevention first.
Now, you said assuming that there's been a risk assessment. What if there hasn't? Why is that an important assumption there for you?
I have a book. Where is it? Right there. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And God, I sound old when I say that book changed my life, but it really did. And habit number 5: seek first to understand, then to be understood. Doesn't do you any good to
Right.
institute prevention against something that's never going to happen. It doesn't do you any good to spend, again, $100,000 to mitigate a $10,000 risk. Just because you know it's there doesn't mean you understand its potential impact, the financial ramifications of that, the reputational implications of that, all of that kind of stuff. You can go through a formal process of risk assessment, business impact analysis, business continuity planning, incident response plan. You can go through that in a formal fashion. That's time consuming and complicated, and every business should go through it once they get to a certain size. But if you're one man show, 5-man show, something like this, it's really hard to find the funds to do that. What you should do is figure out where your vulnerabilities are, talk to an expert, even if it's just for a few minutes, and then
Hmm.
understand what the potential impacts of those are going to be, how much that might cost you if it happens. What are the chances over a period of time that happens? If something could do $100,000 worth of damage and it's basically guaranteed to happen within a 10-year period, that's a $10,000 a year check you're writing. Period. Just imagine that you're writing $10,000 a year to fund that guaranteed exploitation. And if
Hmm.
somebody can mitigate that risk for $1,000, do it. It's a 10-to-1 return. Do it. That's a good thing. It doesn't have to be formally written down for you to see that and understand it. Although as you
Hmm.
get bigger, that's an important process because you lose the ability to control things on just what's in your head and instinctually. But seek to understand. That's critical. That's why I say that.
Hmm.
It's prevention or response depends on the situation. It, if the incident costs you $100 and the mitigation costs you 1,000, just respond. Just do
Right.
something. I had a
Right.
client, and it was kind of a fun conversation. They were in a regulated world,
Hmm.
and he said, "Should we consider a phishing email getting through our filters an incident?" And that really challenged me for a moment because phishing detection is super hard. You're you, ever you know Clients often just get rid of these phishing emails. Well, phishing emails a lot of the time can be totally legitimate from a structural and technical perspective. You're just
Hmm.
trying to glean the intent of the
Hmm.
person sending it.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't consider even malicious actions of internal personnel, like sending stuff to HR or trying to play games with people or something like that, as phishing, but in a sense it is.
Hmm.
And so how do you consider, is that an incident? And
Hmm.
should we activate our incident response plan or emergency operations center every time a phishing email comes in?
Hmm.
Because the consequence of that is huge. And to be honest, I didn't have a good answer. It
Yeah.
was it was a really challenging question.
Mm.
But that's because in the context of that client, I haven't had the opportunity to go through the risk assessment, understand what the impact is
Right.
of that email getting through, how many emails need to get through for somebody to click one and cause the real problem, all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. And I suppose if we had a chance to go down that with the customer, then I could tell them, do you just tell them hit delete? Do you respond? Or do you go through the process of basically an overly oppressive email filter in their world? What's the right choice? And that the
Hmm.
answer is it depends on the
Mm.
potential cost. God, I know you don't want that answer. I'm sorry, David.
No, no, no. I mean, I do not, but I'm just joking. We were talking about people process technology earlier. I liked your response about process being the one that needs the most focus, and that people and technology are really there just to enable the process. Now, this brings me into another question that I have about when thinking about the people or when thinking about risks and thinking about protecting an organization. Do you think it's more effective to educate end users or is it more effective to focus most of the energy on improving the technology?
Education, 100%. Um, I smarter people do smarter things, and the only way you get smart is by learning. You either learn by failure or you learn by training. Those are the only two ways. Unfortunately, human beings learn high 90% of what they know from screwing things up. But the less of that you have to incur from a business perspective, the better off you are. There, unfortunately, we do need technical tools to mitigate risks in
Hmm.
this world. We just do. It's part of the deal. But if you look at the landscape of where the most damaging things happen in our world, it's social engineering. It's people getting fooled now.
Hmm.
We are way easier to hack than just the built-in modern security into most things. And
Hmm.
so you're going to gain the most protection over the outside world just by teaching your people what to watch out for, how to act when they see something worrisome, and how to respond if something bad actually does happen. So
Hmm.
I'm a big believer in education. I'm actually a big believer in education outside of cybersecurity. So
Hmm.
many IT providers throw, yeah, I'll install this software for you. I'll put this tool. I'll do a project and I'll put that in for you. And they throw some brand new fancy ERP software or something, just CRM or whatever, and they don't show the end user how to do it. The only thing
Hmm.
you've done is complicate their lives, slow them down, frustrate them. You haven't done anything.
Hmm.
The implementation is just one step in a many step journey. You need to teach them how to use it, how to leverage it profitably and safely and productively. Same thing
Hmm.
goes for cybersecurity. We can put in the best systems in the world, and that one email slips by that says, "Hey, give me your password." It's over, right? Like
Hmm.
it's bad news. So
Yeah.
education, 100%.
So just thinking about, like hearing you talk about what happens a lot of the times with IT companies and the way they're basically, so a lot of the times what does happen is there's a lot of pushing of tools and maybe
It's
not that much
hard.
education, right? Um, Now, like one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is what's your, so the experience. One of the things that I've been noticing is what happens a lot is that clients expect that their MSPs have their back when it comes to cybersecurity, when in fact that is not what's happening. Um, and I guess contractually or even factually, but my question is this something that you have seen as well? Is this something that you think is like, do you see the world that way as well?
I
Do you
do.
think that's what's
I
happening?
see that happening a lot.
Yeah.
And I mentioned I was an electrician for a while, and the owner of the company that I started with, his name was Chuck, fantastic human being. Um, Man, that job was a rough awakening for me. I was young, I had a lot of ego, I'm relatively intelligent, and so I thought I knew everything. And Chuck and the license that ran my crew showed me your potential doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It's what you know and how you use it and all that kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
I man, they broke me like a horse. But Chuck, I had similar expectations. So I would be working on something in a house, and I would be working with an outlet or something 240 volt or something like that. And I would say, is this off? And Chuck would look at me like, you idiot. Who do you trust?
Okay.
And it took me, I mean, in fact, I think he actually literally said that to me. Who do you trust, Steve? And he goes, it's only your life. And I'm like, I'm an idiot. And so I got up and I go look at the panel every
Hmm.
time. I install the lockout tagout. I make sure it's safe.
Hmm.
So I think I'm just going to go outside the podcast format and speak to business owners a little bit here and say,
We
no,
can
no, no.
close that
So
room and
let's
everything.
just
Yeah.
let's imagine you've just asked me that question again,
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
and I'll answer it.
Hmm.
So I mentioned that I was an electrician uh, in a previous life. When I started that, I was young and egotistical, a lot more ignorant than I thought I was. Thought I knew a lot more than I really did. Um, and My boss, his name was Chuck, just an absolutely fantastic human being. And I credit Chuck in my license, the person that ran my crew named Chad, for like teaching me some fundamentals about how to be an adult. I remember one of my first experiences in that world, and I was working on an outlet, a 240 volt outlet,
Hmm.
and I asked Chuck, he was in the building with us, the owner of the company. I was like, is this off? And he looked at me like I was an idiot. And he goes, who do you trust? And I'm sitting there thinking, and he goes, it's only your life. And so it took me a minute, and I got up and I walked over to the panel, and the breaker was off, but I installed my own lockout tag out on it. And then I
Mm-hmm.
went and worked on the outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy for us to say, oh, they take care of that in the cybersecurity world. I don't need to worry about that. That's what I
Right.
pay them for. Business owners, this is what you have to worry about. Who do you trust? Let's say you're a $10 million business or a $20 million business, and you hire an IT company that's worth $1 million or $2 million or even $3 million, and they have $1 million worth of insurance, and a cybersecurity failure happens. I don't care whose fault it is. And the net result is you incur $5 million worth of damage. What are you going to get? What are you going to do? You can sue that IT company out of existence. You can take all of their insurance. You can sue them. You can get that whole company closed down. You're going to get a couple million out of your $5 million. Or and I'm in this group too. I'm a business owner. And so we can take responsibility and ownership of the things that might impact us.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way we have control over them. The only
Mm-hmm.
way. And that means that as a business owner, do you need to understand every nut and bolt and little bit and piece of cybersecurity? No. But as a business owner, you better understand what the potential risks and vulnerabilities that your business has and are exposed to, what the somebody exploiting those or leveraging those might do to your business, how it might impact you operationally, financially, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you work out an agreement with an MSP or something like that, my little saying is expectations are the language of business.
Mm-hmm.
And the expectations better be written down so that it's
Mm-hmm.
not about, I think that you keep me safe. Because here's the truth. In the cybersecurity world, I don't care how good anybody in cybersecurity is, we can't keep you totally safe. I'm sorry, there's no silver bullet that way. There's no universal protection. It just doesn't exist. We can spend ever increasing amounts of money to give you ever closer to total protection,
Mm-hmm.
but it will have an increasing literal financial cost. It's going to have an ever increasing impact on your operations, all that kind of stuff. So you need to balance that. That's
Mm-hmm.
the how much do I spend to how much do I mitigate kind of thing. And you have to know what you have to do it. So all business owners, you need to understand what vulnerabilities you have, what risks you're exposed to, what regulations impact your business, all that kind of, you need to understand those core things. And then you need to set those expectations with your MSP about what they're going to do and not do.
Mm-hmm.
You might need another party to help you with other parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, you have to measure it. You have to. MSP, do you back me up? Yeah, I back up your stuff. That's great. Show me the reports. Now do a test restore. As a business owner, that's what you should be asking. Because who do you trust? It's only your business life. And so anyway,
So you know what? This has me thinking about something we talked about earlier, education, and we kind of thought about it from a perspective of end users, what they should be clicking on, what they shouldn't be clicking on, and that sort of thing. But when it comes to leadership and owners of a company, what do you think should be the top things that business owners and executive level leadership should be educated in when it comes to cybersecurity?
I think that we talked about process earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I think that cybersecurity is there are blurry lines there.
Mm-hmm.
As far as what's actually cyber and what's not. I know
Right.
we consider phishing a cybersecurity issue. It's not. It's really a people issue. It's not like somebody's literally hacking a firewall and things like that. And so we're talking about a world with a really well defined, like if somebody uses some thing to hack into your firewall and do all kinds of stuff, like yeah, that's a cybersecurity issue. Or if they leverage a vulnerability in RDP or something, yeah. But there's so much of this world that's a gray area there that blurs the lines. And so as a
Mm-hmm.
business owner, You have to understand a few processes. Most business owners go into business understanding the concept of how to deliver their value to their customer,
Mhm.
because they start by knowing how to do something. I know how to make sandwiches, or I know how to clean houses, or I know how to fix computers, or know how to whatever it is, build spaceships. It doesn't matter. The second thing they usually learn is how to control costs. Um, because so that's a process they learn. They learn how to look at their expenses, compare it against their revenues, et cetera, generate a profit so they can grow. A lot of business owners stop there and they run
Mhm.
their business until something bad happens and they lose it. They lose their business. And so what a business owner needs to be educated on is not just how to deliver what I deliver or how to make it profitable to me to do it, um, but it's also how to keep that engine safe. And I don't care if that's cybersecurity, physical security, it doesn't matter. And when you say keep something safe, you have to ask safe against what? And if that bad thing happens, how much does it cost? That goes into the processes. If we look at our cyber program things that cybersecurity professionals do for businesses, we do the same thing any security professional does. We just do it against technological items instead of against physical things or whatever. So business owners need to be educated about things like risk analysis and
Mhm.
um, business impact analysis and risk identification.
Mhm.
Um, and they need to understand their limitations. They need to understand when they look at a server or they look at some complicated piece of equipment and they go, I don't really understand that. I need to find somebody who does and have them help me. Again, they need to be educated, help them understand the vulnerabilities and risks. When I do consulting, cybersecurity consulting with a company, I don't make the decisions on what uh, risk mitigations they put in place, what tools they use, what trainings they do, or whatever. That's none of my business. I
Mhm.
make recommendations, but it's their business. They make the decision,
Mhm.
and that's sacred to me. This is my business. I make the decisions with
Mhm.
it, because at the end of the day, I'm the guy that reaps the benefits or pays the consequences of my actions, and my employees, do too. And so, as somebody they trust to be their leader, I need to own that. And same thing for them. And I need my right to make decisions around that should be respected.
Mhm.
Same thing with them. I give them that same respect, but I
Mhm.
do my best to make sure they're informed. But you asked earlier about something simple, BYOD versus managed device. If they ask me, I'm going to give them the same speech. Managed devices are cheaper. But if they don't think so and they say, nope, I want to use BYOD, I go, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I'm happy to help you. Here is how we keep the BYOD device safe.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do you like that plan or not? And then we move forward.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think understanding the process of cybersecurity, building a cybersecurity program in your business is the most important thing that
Mhm.
a business owner can.
Mhm.
Because if you understand the process, you can find the people and the technology to enable it. There's your
Mhm.
people, process, technology, right? But
Mhm.
if you don't understand the process, you don't know what people you need and you don't know what technology you need. We see it all the time. People buy all of these tools
Mhm.
and they just buy them and they go, I got it. I've got it. And they don't understand, and they may leave a vulnerability exposed because they don't understand all the vulnerability, or they might not configure the tool because they don't have the expertise to do it, but they say they've got it
Mhm.
and they're still not safe.
Mhm. So I have another question based on what you were just talking about. Um, you said, because I agree with you. It's cybersecurity, security, safety, risk, right? Sometimes the lines are a bit blurred. Um, Now, the interesting thing that you mentioned was that social engineering is a really important thing to watch out for, and that it's not cybersecurity. And so, my question to you is, what defines cybersecurity in your point of view? I'm sorry.
Oof, that's a great question. um, I
Or
think
maybe,
anything
yeah.
involving or surrounding um, business technology, risks, and security, uh, vulnerabilities, and exploitation surrounding modern business technology around computing and things like that. I think that's the boundary of cybersecurity. So we brought up phishing earlier. That
Mm-hmm.
leverages email. There's
Mm-hmm.
mobile phishing, whatever you call it nowadays. That's mobile devices. That's a technological device.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas somebody bumping into you into the restaurant saying, "Hey, I'm the new HR person
Oh, I see what you mean
at
now.
our place, and we're trying to get everybody onto direct deposit. Do you mind sharing your bank account information with me?" It's the same question they asked in the email.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a cybersecurity situation? Probably not.
So that's actually like I'm thinking about this right now as well, and I guess because you were talking about those different kind of companies before, right? You were talking about you know starting up your own thrift shop where you get you do your research, you decide you're going to go with a certain do a certain type of fashion or whatever, and in that situation, there's nothing cyber to protect, right? It's
Nope.
all just physical assets, basically, right?
Better have a lock on that garage door.
Totally, yeah. Now, if I could take this example and flip it around, if you're saying your bank account, like, I guess the question is, how do you actually get to this resource? Like, what's the resource that you're protecting, right? So even if it's a social engineering attack, even if someone bumps into you or somehow finds a way to trick the receptionist or whatever, but then ends up using that information uh, to get to an IT resource, would that be considered cybersecurity or not?
I consider it cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I go outside of the realm of what some people are comfortable consulting. I'm a business person first. I've been self-employed for 25 years, and I am a business person first.
Mm-hmm.
And to hard delineate between the edges of things often leaves gaps.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a little bit of overlap in your consideration of, like, again, physical security versus cybersecurity, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I think that, for me, it is just that overlap has to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And man, it's not easy. And if I see a risk in a business, I'm going to talk to the owner about it. I don't care where it comes from.
Right.
It just doesn't matter. And because that's what we do to help each other. Whether they choose to mitigate it or not, it's their business, but
Right.
it's my job. Most
Mm-hmm.
of the ones that I see are cyber related.
Right. Right. So thinking about some of those risks and some of the bad stuff that can happen, ransomware is a big uh, topic for just generally speaking for a lot
Huge
of
in the news all
organizations,
the
right?
time, right?
Um, the question is whether you think it's a better strategy the majority of the time to optimize the way you use existing tech or the tech that you already have, or do you think to defend an organization against ransomware, there needs to be a technological innovation?
I think in your next question, you're going to hear what I think about ransomware in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not supposed to answer both.
But you
Um,
can.
so
You totally
I
can.
think both are important here. I
Mhm.
do think that both are important here.
Mhm.
We need optimization. And what I mean by optimization is, another little saying I have is, the most beautiful expression of intelligence is when you deliver an extremely simple solution to an extremely complicated problem. The problem with ransomware is our solutions to it are extremely complicated.
Mhm.
And it's difficult for business owners and even IT professionals to understand all of the nuances of protecting against this horrible thing, which I'm going to say is not limited to just, it's different than what most people think. Most people think ransomware is, they garbled my data into something that I can't use and I have to pay money to get it ungarbled. And that's not what it is.
Mhm.
We'll talk about that in your next question. But
Mhm.
um, we need optimization in that we need the existing technology and tools to be simpler to implement properly, so that even people that don't spend every waking moment learning and understanding ransomware can flip the right switches and push the right buttons and keep their companies or their clients' companies safe.
Mhm.
And then we do need innovation in that we need to think about how we handle, how we store, how we value, how we data in general.
Mhm.
Um, completely differently. We don't we think that our exposure from a ransomware perspective is just what's in our on our server or in our cloud storage or something like that, but people don't realize how much data and information we freely and openly allow to bleed from us to the outside world all the time. And that brings the BYOD thing into discussion also, but still, we let that information parade out there all over the place, all over the place. There are entire companies that make every penny they make by just collecting what people leak and then reselling it, sorting it and selling it to other people. Data brokers are all over the place. And for instance, here in the United States, credit bureaus. We had a pretty massive credit bureau hack a few years ago. And basically everybody's credit report, social security number, I don't know if it was everybody, it was a lot, got released to the outside world. People don't have any control or say over whether that information is collected by that bureau. And so there needs to be some innovation there, and people need to be able to control what we release from an information perspective. I'll tell you a story. When I was 16, my car needed tires. And I went to my grandfather said, I'm going to go buy you tires. And I didn't realize the torture that I was about to undergo, because I just smiled and said, oh, great. I don't have any money and he's going to buy me tires. This is a good day. So we drove down to Discount Tire, and my grandfather gets to the table and he goes, I'd like to buy some tires for my grandson. He had this kind of deep voice. I'd like to buy tires for my grandson. Anyway, and I'm just sitting there like, I'm getting free tires. This is a good day. And the young man, probably my age, was sitting there at the counter, and he goes, okay, great. And he goes, here's 4 tires. This is the one you should buy. And my grandfather goes, you don't tell me which one I buy. I decide which one. And the kid's eyes get real big, because he had been told, push these tires. We make the most money on them. People complain about them, not much. Go for it. Like, he's doing his job. And anyway, so we roll with this kid, and he has the kid teach him everything about traction, temperature, tread wear, all that kind of stuff on the tires. And I'm just sitting there like trying to crawl behind the countertop, like, I don't know my grandfather. And anyway, then the price comes up, and it's like, let's say $400. And he goes, I'll give you $300. And the kid's like the computer's not even designed to give discounts and stuff. So he goes through this whole other process with these people. And eventually we come to an agreed upon price. It's been like an hour at the counter of something that's just a retail transaction. Anyway, at the end, they come to a deal. And it's like, okay, we have an agreement. And the young man at the counter goes, what's your name and address? And my grandfather goes, what's your name and address? There might be a little defiance in my family. Anyway, so he asks, and the kid looks at him like, huh? And he goes, I need this, and I need this for the warranty. And my grandfather goes, you don't need anything but the receipt for the warranty. If you want my name and address, I promise you that costs more than those tires do. And the kid goes, what? And so he calls the manager over. Another 20-minute conversation. My grandfather's not giving him a bit of it. The manager's like, what if you lose the receipt? And he goes, that's my problem, not yours. If you want my name and address, you need to make me an offer for that information, and it better be high. And that moment in my life, I realized how much value we give away. And it drives my wife nuts, because I get extremely frustrated when I go to the grocery store and they want me to beep the little like track your purchases thing, or when they do that. But that's also the mentality I have when I try and keep my customers safe. Well, just put our email on their phone. You don't need to configure any kind of security policies or app configuration policies and 365 around that. You don't need, and I'm just thinking, well, what if they drag your bidding secrets or something out of your phone? They've got access to your entire wealth of companies' data on this little sheet of glass in their pocket. We're talking BYOD again. And all they have to do to take all of your processes, that's what a business is processes and IP. You can destroy buildings, you can destroy, you can get rid of every employee, you can do all the things. If you have the processes and the IP, you can rebuild a business a lot easier than you can if you had all the people and all the buildings, but none of that. And all they have to do is this to take everything that you have. And so anyway, that thing right there was huge to me in understanding the value of data. Ransomware is about the value of that data, and they understand that. It is just huge. And
so I'm really curious about the next question then, like, because you said that it ties into the next question, which is, should you pay or should you not pay?
okay, so here's the deal. Pay or not pay is a business decision. If you have already incurred ransomware, if you've been ransomed, the number of cybersecurity failures that have already happened are huge. You have already had somebody find a vulnerability, exploit it, infiltrate your system, exfiltrate your data. They've stolen your data. And if you're in a medical industry, financial services industry, you handle a lot of PII, something like that, the expense is already being incurred. The breach has occurred, the expense of that breach, you need to be on the phone with your insurance company, whether they ransom something or not. You've already paid. And then they garble it up and say you can't have it. And so at that point, it's an insurance decision, all that. Do I believe in paying criminals? No. They've already gotten paid. You don't have to pay them. They're just going to sell your data and make money on it anyway. What's the difference? And so that's a complicated question, and the answer should revolve around a business decision. And I hate to say that because I know that there is a principle consideration in that. Like as a principle, do I not pay criminals? Well, what if that costs 10 people down the hallway their job? If I stand on that principle, what kind of person am I? That's a complicated question. And so my answer to that is, it depends on what the cost is. If it is profitable at that point to pay the ransom and it saves people's jobs, well, I guess you do it. If it's, if you're paying money for something that they could release and it doesn't matter, and if you have good RPO and RTO metrics and you can just flip a switch, get yourself back up and running, tell them take a hike.
All right, the next question. So you hired an MSP, you've done everything they asked, and still you're breached. And let's say it's a ransomware event, right? One of those where it's really about data being made unavailable, and there's an encryption key or whatever. Who should bear the cost?
I would say that depends on the expectations. In the MSP's contract, do they guarantee that you will be safe from that type of event? I guarantee you will not get ransomwared. And so and to be fair, that's how some MSPs sell.
Can I just jump in there? Because that's actually, this is actually a question that I now realize, after having done several of these interviews, should have been phrased differently, because it totally depends on the contract. I guess the question should be, what should customers look for in an MSP? Should they push and pick an MSP based on whether the risk is shared, or is that maybe not viable for some reason? I guess that's kind of what
I think the first thing you look for in an MSP is brutal honesty. And the second thing you look for is expectations. I have seen, because I've done consulting for a number of other MSPs and helped them with their offerings and operations and all of that. And there's not very many people realize this, but there's two, we'll call it scope of works to everything that gets sold. There's the external one and the internal one. Let's say you go to McDonald's and you want a hamburger. You don't buy bun, lettuce, tomato, meat, blah, 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 assembled in this fashion with this size and this weight and all that kind of stuff. You buy a Big Mac or you buy a quarter pounder, right? The scope of work to you is Big Mac. On the other side, they have the scope of work that says, here's how this is assembled. And so the first thing to understand about business, there's two sets of expectations. It is important in our world, because it is so nuanced, to, number one, deliver your package or explain your package in a very easy to understand, constricted fashion. You have to, it's the way you sell everything. You have to be like, this is my security package and this is my whatever. And the person goes, the potential customer goes, that sounds great. So you're going to protect me against ransomware. You're going to protect me against this and that and this and that. And you go, that's right. But this is where that honesty comes in, because this is what I call a high consequence business. It's different than hamburgers. If you don't like the taste of the hamburgers, you just buy a different one next time. If you don't like the taste of your cybersecurity provider or solutions because you got hacked, that's an entirely different consequence. So it's important, number one, for the MSP to go, this is how I bundle it, so you can understand it easily and to generate the desire, so I actually get to engage in business and do business with you. But now let's take a moment and let me explain to you exactly what you get, in what quantities, what those quantities are leveraged against, and what I guarantee and don't guarantee. Mm-hmm. And so then the question becomes, if you get ransomware, well, did I promise to install ransomware protection on this server or this workstation or this whatever? Did I promise to deploy Sentinel-1? Did I promise to, have SIEM/SOC servers? That kind of stuff. Yeah. And then the question becomes, did I do that or not? And if I did all of those things, and it's some kind of novel, brand new zero-day exploit that nothing thought of and all that, and it infiltrates the business and hits them, is that the MSP's fault? I don't think so. I am not a lawyer and I am not a jury. And so that's why lawyers have jobs. And owning and running an MSP, I understand that there's a certain level of risk from interpretation that I just have to assume. Mm-hmm. That even if I write everything perfect to me, that it explains exactly what people get when they get it. Every product, expected actions against expected items and expected quantities at an expected pace for an expected price. Everything. Even if I define that perfectly, it's going to be interpreted different by different people. And there's an amount of risk that I assume just by doing business. And am I going to get sued for something I don't think is my fault? And even though, and lose? Yep, it could happen.
Possibly.
And that's just the risk that we take. Who should be at fault is the person who didn't meet the expectations.
Okay. Looking at a topic that is very close to what I do, password policies. There are different standards that are used in practice and as a to improve password security, basically. Some of them say you should change a password every so often. Other standards basically say you should make a password that is strong and you should never change it. So my question is, how often should a password be changed for it to be as secure as possible?
This is personal preference. I recommend that my clients change their passwords once a year. That's longer than some people and shorter than other people. And you will get people going, they should never change their password. It just makes them use easier ones because they can't possibly remember them all, and et cetera, et cetera. They're not wrong. And then there's some people that say that's long enough so that it could, again, that leakage of information, it could make its way into the wild and be exploited. Really big, bad wars have been fought over places where both sides are right. And what's really at the core of it is that my answer is once a year is what I do. I'm to be honest, it's a gut thing. Mm-hmm. Because I do think that a password that exists into perpetuity has over time a greater and greater and greater chance of being exploited. Mm-hmm. But I also think that something you ask somebody to change every 30 days is so oppressive to the way the habit engine of the human mind works that they're going to write down, screw you 1, screw you 2, screw you 3, and it's not going to work. So I tried to find a middle ground there. That's my truth. I also think passwords suck. So with my offerings, I give away Password Manager, just period. You pay me for a service. There's a few things you get. You get backups on every critical piece of data. You get a Password Manager no matter what. Mm-hmm, you don't have a choice. Amongst other things, you get a certain base level of security software and protections. I just won't do it without it. And the truth is that it's not for them. It's for me. It's because
Mm-hmm.
of those exact situations we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what happens when I set the expectations to me perfectly and they don't see it that way and I get sued.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to have backups of their information. I want them to have control of their passwords. I want all that. So passwords are already so bad, we have to have a little digital manager out there. And that's where products like yours and other things like that are going to really help society. It's a necessary innovation and transition that we just got to figure out how to make it through.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about two hypes, maybe trends.
Okay.
One is zero trust architecture, zero trust networking architecture. You know, it's been. I think the reason why it's interesting is because I think we're probably beyond the hype of zero trust
Yeah,
now, right? Like
absolutely.
it's kind of happened, and my question is, in retrospect, or looking at zero trust from today's perspective, do you think it's something that for you personally and for your company has totally changed the way you do security, or has had an immense impact on the way you think about cybersecurity? Or do you see in retrospect that it was more of just a buzzword?
So I think it is a buzzword, but it's an important buzzword because it acts as and here's why I think it's a buzzword. There's no such
Mm-hmm.
thing as zero trust.
Mm-hmm.
You always allow somebody access why do you have the network if it's literally zero trust? Nobody can get into it or use it. I don't trust anybody. Nobody can connect to this. Ha ha. It's the same thing as me saying unplug all your computers and turn them all off. And, like it doesn't work. So from that
Right.
perspective, it's a buzzword.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandfather engaged in zero trust tire purchasing. That's what that was.
Yeah.
And so as a concept and a guide, it helps us understand how we should perceive things. And it goes into like
Mm-hmm.
principal least privilege and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it helps us, for instance, if we store our files in with some SaaS provider, and I hate to name any because I don't want to say they're not zero trust, but anyway, you store your files offline in a provider like SharePoint or Dropbox or Box or somebody like that,
Yeah.
and they have the decryption keys to the data. To me, that's already a breach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and um, and so I would prefer to leverage data storage technologies where we keep the keys. It's not zero trust. We trust us with the key.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually the customer or whatever, right? But they trust
Right.
me with the key too as their technical guide.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but as a principle, as a concept, I agree with it. I think it's very important because it is not the standard mentality of a human being today to be zero trust. We
Mm-hmm.
trust everybody everywhere. I get on Facebook Live or Instagram and I tell everybody where I am and what I'm doing and why I'm there and all that kind of stuff. And the security person in me goes, stop doing that. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
scary.
Mm-hmm.
Now they know you're not home and they, like don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a concept, and maybe a principle that or a goal, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's critical for us right now to keep that in our heads. So
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it's the creation of the term
Mm-hmm.
and the concept that it's built on.
Mm-hmm. By the way, hearing you talk about SaaS providers having the encryption keys to your data reminds me of a new concept that's hasn't really been adopted too much yet, but it's quite interesting in the identity space, called self-sovereign identity. And it's basically
Okay.
the idea of taking identity away from identity providers and providing end users with means so that they can be in control of their identities, not just um, from a process perspective, but technologically as well, right? And you mentioned encryption keys. It's a lot about cryptography and that sort of thing. We're yet to see how this thing is going to develop because there are some technical limitations to
That's
what
hard.
what can be done, and in a way that's actually um, viable and just practical. One of those things, one of these things that's kind of this is there's different concepts of how this could be implemented. One of them um, is a standard now called DIDS, which is stands for decentralized identifiers, and it's basically
Mhm.
a standard built around blockchain. Um,
Oh, okay. Distributed ledger.
yeah, yeah, that's kind of going for having a different way of uh, working with identifiers of people and things, and doing it in a way that's distributed and that's less centralized in identity providers, etc. Me personally, I think
So in other words,
the
trust
thing,
by agreement. In other words, like it's a blockchain type thing. So we believe you are who you are because everybody else says it's true to a certain extent.
and also it's verifiable because there are
There's a
verification.
chain.
There are verification methods basically
Yep.
that really lie on top of cryptography, and there usually there's an expectation of a design that makes that cryptography um, protected well enough and that sort of thing, right? So there's the problem is, I think, it's always about people using services and technologies. The one thing with blockchain is it's very cryptographic. It's very cryptography centric, I would say. The whole idea is and this is one thing I'd like people to understand. It's not actually um, the person that owns the data that's stored on a distributed ledger, but technically speaking, it's actually the key that is
Right.
right. It's and whoever has the key is the owner of that data factually, right? That's how that really works. And so that anyway, it's just me rambling about it's
No,
just
no, no. That's an awesome concept that needs to be brought to fruition. That
yeah.
that's a really cool thing. Um, I That's something I would like to see evolve. Cool stuff.
But honestly, it is similar to zero trust in that I'm in this particular instance, I'm not actually sure if it's achievable, right? Because it is, I think that is the way it should be, right? But it's not clear yet whether it's actually technically feasible. That's an interesting thing in its own, right? Anyway.
Yeah, Jamie asked me a question. Um, is it easier to prevent or to respond to an incident?
Mm-hmm.
And I answered it's easier to respond. And I said people aren't going to like that answer. But but to and the reason is it's like it's easy.
You
Here's
kind
how
of
your
have to,
business should run. Let me build you a whole new server stack. Let me just like, here you go. Okay, we responded. You're all put back together. In fact, we installed new software and got you going and all that kind of stuff.
right?
Um, and but it's not cheaper. It's easier to create a new user when another one's been just exploited or something like that in a system. But once an identity has been exploited, how do you fix that?
Yeah,
Like that's a rough situation. An identity, like an
yeah.
actual identity.
Like
Once it can become duplicated, that's a really okay,
like
Steve. You need to be a different person tomorrow.
yeah, like you mentioned the social security number, right? That's a
How do I get a new one?
yeah.
We can't really. Yeah.
Well, I actually think that what this exposes is much more the design of the social security number as a way of dealing with identity. But
Yes,
anyway, that's another
it is. It's
that's another
obfuscated identity, right? Like
yeah.
I'm not a name and an address. I'm a number.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't it is an identifier. I am to the United States a lot more social security number than I am Steve Massaro, my house address, all that kind of stuff. I am just a social security. That is my unique identifier. And the problem is once somebody else starts using that, you can't just go into the social security office and be like, hey, give me a new number.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
But the problem is, I think the problem is that you can actually the fact that you can use it somehow.
Yes.
That's the problem, right?
Yes.
It's
That
it's
it
it's
isn't.
I mean,
Yeah.
like there's one part of it that has to do with privacy, that,
It's not zero trust.
but it's the fact that you can, just knowing it means you can do something with it and you can use it.
Right.
That is a problem, right?
Agreed.
Anyway, the other hype thing, which is very current, is AI. And specifically looking at AI, and from a lens of cybersecurity, do you see, especially the big trends that have been going on with um, automation just being implemented everywhere? Do you see that as a more of a force for good, or do you see any major, or do you see that the pitfalls or the downsides just prevail?
Yes. No, so I see it as an escalation. And what I mean by that is, if you look back in time, when I started in business, because I'm old and a grandfather now, there was no internet, there was no email.
Mhm.
My dad worked in gas and oil and gas, and he would run a gas plant in one town, and then the corporate office would be in another.
Mhm.
And when they wanted a big report, like an accounting report or something like that, well, the printer would start, it'd be one of those old dot matrix things. It'd be like, and inevitably it'd be on one direction only. So go, and then wham, the thing would go back, and, and it'd take forever to print this accounting report, like forever.
Mhm.
And then finally they pick up this stack of like accordion like paper, they'd throw it in a Chevy Suburban, and they'd drive it a few hundred miles to the corporate office. So when an accounting person called the thing and said, I need to get a production report for this place, it took hours, if not days, to
Mhm.
deliver. In today's world, we can create the same thing in seconds. In fact, if you do not create it in seconds, there's a possibility you get terminated, right? Like, it is that critical. So we are hundreds, if not thousands of times more productive. At least that's what we tell ourselves. But do we live better lives, like 100 times better or 1,000 times? Everybody does things 100 times faster. But do we live 100 times better lives? No. I mean, we got some cool stuff we've invented,
Mhm.
but no, not really. The one thing that I see that's enhanced my life is now when I want to become something else or learn something else, I can just pop open the internet and become not an expert, but become pretty proficient at something in a few days. That's a really cool thing. But functionally, the way I live, my comfort level, all that hasn't really changed.
Mhm.
Why? Because everybody else escalated with it. And
Mhm.
so it'd be one thing if I was in a bubble and I got the internet and I got email and I got reports that I could attach and send and I got, or whatever, just the data just ended up at the corporate office in the first place and nobody else did. That offers me an advantage over everybody else, and I would live a better life, 100
Mhm.
times better. When we look at hyper successful business people or hyper successful businesses, it's because they have gained that and leveraged it before everybody else gained it in the first place. AI is going to be very similar in that. The people that adopt it and leverage it first, whether it's for good or bad, are going to experience, if they do it correctly, are going to experience the benefits of that in that moment. But once
Mhm.
everybody else has it and uses it, it will be equalized and we will just have to use it and have to perform with it. We won't have a choice to
Mhm.
live what is essentially the same life.
Mhm.
So it's an escalator. There, I use quite a bit of AI because I look at it that way, as a tool that I can leverage. I want to leverage it for good.
Mhm.
Like if I develop a cybersecurity program for a client and I put in the hard work, and I mean, I do it, right? I examine them, I understand them, I develop the report, but then I pump that report into a system and one that I control and one that does not allow for data exfiltration. Please be careful with AI. Do not throw stuff into the free version of Chat GPT or something where it can be used for training. But LLMs that I control and say, can you find any omissions or errors, or do you have thoughts about how I can improve this? Sometimes it spits out crap. Like, I'm not going to use what it says. But 7 out of 10 times what it spits out is very useful.
Mhm.
And I go, I didn't think about that. And I put it in so it improves my product.
Mhm.
It right now, that's what it is. It is not the seed, it is the fertilizer. But I use it professionally right now in that regard. And you better believe the malicious entities are using it in the same way.
Mhm.
And so we're already down that path. And so it is a force for good. It is a force for delivering more value in a shorter period of time to make people more than they are. It
Mhm.
is that already. It's actually a very difficult tool to use correctly. Everybody thinks it's this incredible thing. It's changing the world. In the world of tools, it's kind of crappy. Um, if you think about like highly efficient factories and things like that, like a manufacturing plant nowadays can make millions and millions of copies of one thing with a factory worker that's sitting there like this, and they don't ever have to touch the thing or mess with it or anything like that.
Mhm.
That's a pretty efficient tool. Like it requires somebody to exert basically zero energy to do something millions of times,
Mhm.
even complicated things. With LLMs specifically, or even building models for machine learning or things like that, it takes some smart people with great training, and it's still not perfect every time. Like it's not this fantastic tool yet. Um, but people that know how to use it are getting a lot of gold out of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you're not into AI, you should be. Um, if only because you realize that they are too.
I'm really curious about, you said we're not living better lives than before. My question is, how do you measure that? Like, what's the way?
Is that a how do you define success question?
Well, is it
It
success?
is a
I don't
little,
know.
right?
Is it? Is
Life
better life?
today
Mhm.
is life today is fast and stressful and
Mhm.
complicated. And we tell ourselves we have more leverage over the environment, each other, how we exist, who we are, all of those things. But if I look back at, and maybe I was just looking at it through child's eyes or something like that, we have had some really cool innovations, some really neat things happen in humanity over the decades that I've been alive. But people, for everything that we've built and everything we've designed and how cool everything is, people to me don't seem to be happier, to be more comfortable,
Mhm.
to be any of those things. And so I think it's important. This is business also, the value gap, right? And that we understand that more complication does not equal better life. And I do that in my business. When I go to a customer, I don't say, how many more tools can I put in? How many more things can I do for you? How much more complicated can I make it?
Mhm.
It's how much easier can I make it for you to make your money?
Mhm.
That's it. How can I keep you safe with half the crap? How can I make you deliver your product to your customer with half the effort and half of the tools?
Mhm.
That's to me, that's the value. And like all the things we've done, all the energy we've spent, all the creations we've done, all the things we've invented, people still shooting missiles at each other. People still go hungry. People still like all kinds of stuff. That's what I mean by that. We need
Mhm.
to be really careful about what we tell each other is beneficial, and really take into consideration: am I just adding a complexity to this that the net result of isn't really going to gain us much? And
Mhm.
again, there have been some things that have made life much better. That the 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 ability for me to access the wealth of information that is the internet and people's content creation, like a podcast like this or something like that, just on a whim,
Mhm.
and to experience more things and learn more things in life. That's something I value to a huge degree. The day I stop learning is the day that I die. That provides value to me, is understanding. And so some of our innovations have done that to a huge degree, and that's super cool to me.
Mhm.
Other things have just made things faster paced, more stressful, where it's almost like we're just shoving things back and forth to each other over and over and over again, and it
Mhm.
doesn't really build or do anything.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
that's
Great, man. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing all the answers. I'm definitely gonna go buy and read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because you mentioned how important it is to you. I think it sounds like one of those reads everyone should look into. Um,
and it's easy to buy a book like that and criticize it because of disagreements with the authors religious beliefs or just some other fundamentals about being old time or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at, we talk about zero trust being a buzzword, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All
Mm-hmm.
7 habits, buzzwords, all of them. The concepts behind them are absolutely fundamental, absolutely critical, in my belief, will work across any point in time in humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And if every time I make a mistake, and I'm not free from that, every time I make a mistake, I go, what habit did I not follow?
Mm-hmm.
And there's always.
All right. Well, all the more reason to look into it. Thanks for being here with me today, Steve.
David, it has been an absolute pleasure.
I hope you had a good time.
I had a great time.
That's great. Well, that's what this is about. I'm going to be doing other types of sessions. So if you enjoyed it, if you'd like to be on one of the podcast shows in the future,
I
I'm
would be honored.
more than
if
happy to
would
have
me
you.
back.
And you have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.